I'm Bob Brill. He's Erik Kramer. Welcome to Kramer and Brill Fantasy Football Podcast, and now a video cast as well. So you can hear the podcast wherever you get your podcast, and also you can see the video cast on YouTube by going to my Bob Brill YouTube channel or by finding the links for all of this at kramerandbrill.com. That's the easiest way. So we're into week 6 now. The winners this week: Justin Herbert, Tom Brady, Josh Allen. Brady with over 400 yards and 5 more TD passes. Incredible. Herbert and Winston each had 4, and Herbert was just behind Brady with 398 yards and no picks. Plus, Herbert had a rushing touchdown, so he actually had 5 touchdowns as well.
I'll throw another one in there that's not going to surprise anybody anymore, and that's Lamar Jackson last night going, over 400 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, another 60-plus on the ground for over 500 yards total, and then ended up putting the game-winning pass and drive together in overtime. So obviously he's either back to or becoming more of what he's already been. And then sure, he had the fumble early in the game, right, that went back. And but what he gives you is not even comparable to anybody else. And
the team's leading rusher outside of him had 6 carries for 25 yards.
right. Well, and they, like everybody knows, they already lost all the running backs for the season again anyway, except for the best one. And but so, and like I said, I think he's looking more comfortable now, as an all-around quarterback, almost like maybe not quite like Russell Wilson is as the complete package, but he's moving in that direction, I'll say. And, and what's always going to be scary, or at least for the foreseeable future, is every time he steps on the field, he is that game's best athlete.
Yeah.
And so anyway, another guy that jumped out at me was Matthew Stafford, but just doing what Matthew Stafford now does in LA week to week. And Matt Ryan, though, who you could almost say, me at least, was starting to write off.
Yeah.
And then,
big time.
And now, right. And now here he jumps up and again goes, what's over 70%, 75% pass completion rate, I believe it was. A couple of touchdown passes, over 300 yards. And now Pitts is finally the guy arrived on the scene and went over 100 yards himself with a touchdown. So, and then your guy, Ben, came out of the grave, apparently, and put together what I only saw the first drive initially, which looked like textbook, Roethlisberger from 20 years ago. And now it looks like at least for 1 week, they've survived and revived. Yeah,
it was one of those things that he had some bad moments. He still had some overthrows. And I thought when he got the ball stripped from him early on, that he wasn't going to get up, when he hit the ground. But he did, and that is typical Roethlisberger too. So,
yeah. I was going to say one thing, and I know we'll probably get to it at some point later, but hard to get past the Gruden Raiders that are now in survival mode. Hopefully this doesn't. I think they avoided what could have been a free fall, and but now they've kind of opened up a much larger conversation that's going to be around a while too.
Yeah, this has been like we were talking beforehand. I mean, the Gruden thing at least took the pressure off Urban Meyer for that story for a while, but I'm sure we're going to get back to that as well here in the next couple of weeks, depending how things shake out.
They've got their option to cut bait too.
And we thought that was going to happen last week, and then boom, Gruden explodes, and Chucky moves on. So among the running backs, I'll talk a little bit about the running backs. Some big days. Nick Chubb had the most yards with 161, but Derrick Henry had the most as far as points go, or close to the most with points as far as fantasy goes, had 130 because he had 3 touchdowns. Now, you love Austin Eckler, had a pair of scores on the ground, 1 in the air on 5 catches. Other winners, I said to pick up Alexander Madison. What did he do? He rushed for 113 and had 7 catches, including a touchdown. Gaskin came out of nowhere, 10 catches, two touchdowns, while James Robinson had 149. So it was a big day for running backs getting a lot of yards. Some of them didn't get so many touchdowns, but the yards were there.
Well, let's go back a second to Nick Chubb. Okay, so Nick Chubb's always going to have Kareem Hunt in his hip pocket. Mm-hmm. So those two together, by far, are the best running back tandem in the NFL, maybe ever. But now you've got Derrick Henry, who's just there's no other Derrick Henry on Derrick Henry's team.
Right.
And so that's, he's going to be what he is, and he's a Mack truck anyway. But like you said with Alexander Madison, I looked it up, and so twice this year he's filled in and starts for Dalvin Cook. Twice he's gotten over 20 carries in both of those games, and twice he's gone over 100 yards. So I think you're right. He's definitely there. That team as an offense, I don't care who we're talking about, they're all good. And then I think in the they are who we thought they were category. I think the Cowboys are now becoming who we thought the Chiefs were. Right. And Dak Prescott obviously going over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then Zeke exploded again for another 100 yards plus and a touchdown. And the other guy I think is what's that?
Receivers are solid.
Yeah, everywhere across the board, offensively, even defensively now, they're making plays. And I think Jonathan Taylor, even though he didn't go over 100 yards rushing, he did have over 100 yards receiving, made possible by that one long, 75-yard plus screen pass. But he's got so much speed. And I think now with Carson Wentz, if he continues to play this well, teams are going to have to start putting that 2-shell defense behind there, and which is going to open some running lanes for Jonathan Taylor.
Talk about the wide receivers. Devontae Adams had 11 catches for 206 and a score. That's 37 points in PPR leagues. That's a lot of points. Antonio Brown, 7 for 124, had a pair of touchdowns. Kadarius Toney with the Giants had 10 for 189 on 13 targets, but he was injured. There was a fight, and he got tossed. So we'll have to wait and see where that falls out as far as if there's any suspensions or anything for this coming week. David Njoku had 7 to 149 and a score at tight end. Tight ends were this week, but he was probably the best of them.
Thinking back to John Gruden being, however you want to say it, fire, resign, I think Kadarius Toney and anyone else who steps outside the lines in that way probably picked the wrong week to do that. I was going to say, too, I think Mark Andrews, going back to kind of with Lamar Jackson's reemergence, so to speak, or just continuation of, Mark Andrews went off last night for almost 150 yards and a couple of touchdowns. And Robert Woods with the Rams, it's either going to be him or Cooper Kupp. This week it was him for 12 catches for 150 yards. And then your man – right. And then you predicted it with Claypool's return. He'd have a big game, and he did. Not only turned up, big numbers wise, he made a big body touchdown catch in the red zone, which, if it wasn't a 6'4", 235-pound guy, would that catch have been made? So I think that was pretty cool to watch. And then Dawson Knox went off, as a tight end with the Bills last night or Sunday night, and 3 touchdowns and or 1 touchdown, only 3 catches. But obviously with Josh Allen as the quarterback, who's going to extend some plays behind the line of scrimmage, that's going to open up all the receivers and the guy with the arm to get it there.
There's only a couple of guys this week that really kind of stood out when it came to the downside. I hate to call them the losers, but they're the losers bracket. Toney, with being in a fight and getting ejected after having a big game. And Sam Darnold with 3 picks, only 177, fell back to, he's been sailing along, and you've been talking about this, and he's been really, a rebirth of Sam Darnold. And then this game was just a stinker for him. 3 picks, 177 yards.
Yep. And, it's tough to keep it going, man, in this league, every single week for 16, 17 straight weeks. And so you're bound to have a fall here and there. And the big thing is, now that Darnold found this rebirth in Carolina, leaving New York, can he get back up on the horse the following week and then keep riding again? And I think that's what everyone's going to be watching for.
Oh, yeah, this week we both liked Zeke Elliott. He did well, pair of touchdowns. We both liked Nick Chubb, which we talked about, 161. You loved Austin Eckler. He did well. I liked Madison. He did well. Davis Mills we liked, as well as Jacoby Brissett, who had they all had good days, and so did Mac Jones. So it was pretty good across the board. We had some good outstanding times, and only a couple of guys that fell below the radar. So let's get right to the games. Bucks and Eagles. Jalen Hurts, no match for the Bucks defense. He's still a work in progress despite a big win over Carolina. So I'm not starting him, but I'm good with Devonta Smith as a flex and possibly Dallas Goedert at tight end. But watch the injury wires with him.
I agree with you on Jalen Hurts, and sure, he gives the threat of both the run and the pass for not only yards but touchdowns too. But like you said, just not consistent enough yet. Brady, on the other hand, 5 games with 2 over 400 yards and 1 nearly 400-yard day, and in those 3 games, he's got 10 touchdown passes at the age of 44. And he's got all the weapons in the world, and yet Gronk's not one of them at the moment.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'd continue to not only ride Brady, but I think the one receiver I'd lock in on right now is Mike Evans.
And over
Over AB, I think so, just because he's got maybe not Antonio Brown's sudden speed, but he's got great length, size. He's got speed himself. He pretty much, you throw the ball up and he's the one going to come down with it.
Dolphins and Jags. I like Jacoby Brissett here. I'm on your bandwagon, and I like him to team up with Myles Gaskin. I had 10 receptions on 10 targets last week. He led the team in carries at 5 for 25, which isn't much, but they're playing the Jags. So if you want to throw Jalen Waddle in there, I'm good there too.
Well, yeah, okay. Unlike the Raiders that we talked about before, Mark Davis parting ways with John Gruden, for some reason, Shad Khan's still hanging on to Urban Meyer. And although Urban's recent indiscretions, they don't cut across the grain of the society at large like Gruden has. But he himself has now become the distraction for his team, as if a bad team just got worse in the last couple of weeks. And I think the longer he stays, the harder it's going to be for the players to focus on improvement as a football team. And in terms of fantasy players with the Jags, James Robinson is still doing it. Yep. And he went off for 150 yards almost in this last game on only 18 carries versus Tennessee, who's found somewhat of a resurgence.
Then we're going to switch over to Chiefs in Washington. This Antonio Gibson just keeps on marching. I mean, I liked him when he came into the league, and he just hasn't stopped. He's been real consistent. I think McLaurin is solid here. I like Adam Humphries and DeAndre Carter. The guy I really like here is from a couple of weeks ago. I said no to this guy today. I like Taylor Heineke, but not against the Chiefs.
Well, and today I'm saying no. I've cooled a little bit on Taylor, and he's had a couple of good games, but they were both of those games against subpar defenses at the time. And but this last week against an excellent New Orleans defense, he was not good at all. Now the Chiefs are also really a subpar defense, but I'd stick with McLaurin and Gibson, like you just mentioned. The Chiefs, on the other hand, Mahomes, that guy's got to protect the ball. He's true. Their defense has not been playing well, but he's got 6 interceptions in the last 4 games. And for him, that's a lot. Kelsey is back to being, a not only consistent performer, but, I guess his last game was more of a traditional tight end, a little over 50 yards and a touchdown. But I think backing up the silent week he had the year before is at least a start in the right direction. And I think Mahomes is going to still throw for a lot of yards, but the interceptions are what bothers me or makes me nervous about starting him. And then, as I think I had mentioned a few weeks ago, right after Clyde Edwards-Helaire had kind of asserted himself, he's kind of now uninserted himself as a starter. And at this point, he's got no rushing touchdowns.
Rams and Giants. Giants, even though we've talked about the what he did here, I think New York has found its new wideout in Kadarius Toney. I mean, he caught 10 of 13 for 189. He ran for 7. He even tried to pass, but you have to keep an eye on the injury wires and the NFL restriction wires, I guess you could call them, because the injury isn't the issue. It's his temper, which we talked about, and the incident that happened. Daniel Jones is solid here, but Saquon Barkley out again for several weeks with this ankle injury that just looks awful. And what that does mean that Devontae Booker is solid as far as a pickup to carry the ball this week. He did in relief of Barkley, and he's going to be the number 1 guy there for at least a few weeks.
Isn't it amazing, like all the unforeseen things that can happen? Like in the first 5 games, much less the next 13, that, you got Kadarius Toney, who you just mentioned, had the game of his life so far, and yet who knows, he may draw suspension. And then you got Saquon Barkley gets back on his feet only to now re-injure his ankle. And so I agree with you. It's tough. But flipping over to the Rams side, you know, you know, when you mentioned Daniel, well, not to flip over to the Rams yet, but Daniel Jones, the way he wobbled away, you know, is he solid? Is he even going to play this week? I don't know. But I would say, you know, looking back or looking at the Rams now, that combination of, you know, McVay and now with Stafford having all the same weapons, it's just a matter of Stafford's a start. Who he's going to be throwing the ball to or running the ball from week to week, who knows? But I think at least for now, Stafford's the guy. And if it was me, I think I'd go with Robert Woods.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, he's been kind of pedestrian as far as Robert Woods is concerned until last week when he just went kind of, I think it was 27 points in PPR leagues. It's just incredible. The Colts and Texans. This is one of those games. You know, Wentz had 402 yards and 2 scores and no picks in the last game. He looks solid, and why not coming up against Houston? He is a start this week if you have him, I think. I also like Marlon Mack this week. You know, you know I love Michael Pittman, and all he did was 6 catches for 89 and a touchdown on a team 7 targets, and he's definitely moved into wide receiver 1 status. You know, you mentioned Jonathan Taylor, and I love Jonathan Taylor too, but I wouldn't be fooled by that 116 yards receiving, because 76 came on one play, and it wasn't a deep play. It was a short pass over the middle, you know.
I got it. But like I said before, I'll be fooled by Jonathan Taylor. If I had him, I'd start him. This is not a good Texans team or defense, and I think, you know, to do it against a tough Baltimore defense, you know, that's probably why I would give the credit to them, their defense. For, you know, for the most part, at least shutting down, you know, the Colts running game. But I don't see the Texans doing that. And I think, you know, the Texans just allowed Mac Jones allowed a 300-yard passing game out of him. And they don't really have the weapons for anybody, much less a rookie quarterback, to go over 300 yards. And I think just the way Wentz went off last night, I think that's going to make the Texans, you know, back up, like I mentioned earlier, a little further than normal, and which is going to open up some running lanes for that offensive line and Jonathan Taylor.
Bengals at Lions. Joe Burrow seems to be okay after a throat issue. Jamar Chase has turned into a monster receiver, and I want to add T. Higgins and Joe Mixon to the list of starts here. I do like Uzomah, although, you know, I like him here, even though he only had 2 targets last week. The week before, he looked really, really good, had a couple of touchdowns. I think he's still a play. If you have a great tight end, I mean, he's not. But if you're in the pedestrian tight end situation, I do like him this week.
I'll defer to you, I guess, as a fantasy owner, since you've done it for so long. But I think I told you, don't expect another week out of Zuma.
No, you're right. You're right. No, you did.
But I would say to flip over to the Lions, unfortunately, being 0-5 the way they are, they've played as an 0-5 team. It was heartbreaking, the loss they had against Minnesota, because they really did play well enough to win, and for the second week in a row, lost on a field goal. Their time's coming, but fantasy wise, there's really no one there to count on.
Packers and Bears in a division game with the Bears playing okay and the Pack playing just a bit better. Rodgers are going to harass, but he's a must start. I like Randall Cobb here as a possible flex. And aside from the regular guys on the Packers, I really love A.J. Dillon here. But you're going to tell me the Bears are going to shut him down anyway. So
no, I'm not. No, that dude's legit, man. And he comes in at a time when they've already got you on your heels anyway. And the guy is a devastating, powerful runner. And he's got some speed too. The Bears, in fact, I would say temper that little 2-game winning streak they're on, because they got, as you know, probably annihilated worse than any team this year so far against the Browns. And then they played the winless Lions next, and then they had the game against the Raiders during the week of, you know, what's probably likely been their most tumultuous week ever. And so fantasy wise, the Bears don't have much. They don't, you know, they've got a young quarterback who is, I don't think he's broke 200 yards yet as a starter.
No, he's struggling to get 100 at times.
Right. You name for me a receiver, a running back, a tight end, or Justin Fields himself, who shows any potential to even go off. And again, this Packers defense is pretty good. So I don't know. I wouldn't start any Bear. I wouldn't have a Bear on my roster, I don't think, at this point, unless it was Mooney. But I don't think I'd even start him this week.
How about Khalil Herbert?
You know, if they score, okay, if they score, he'll likely be the guy to carry it across. You know, but it could easily be Justin Fields too, or you know, but who's to say they're going to score more than 14, 17, 20 points?
Well, just FYI, I picked him up last night.
I think he's a good pickup to carry forward.
You know, the thing is, Juju went down; he's out for the season, so I had to pick up somebody off my because I put him on IR, and I went for a running back instead of a receiver because I had an opening there. And looking at the bye weeks coming up, you know, I'm saying, hey, you know, I kind of probably going to need a running back to throw in here, and they're starting to come up in a couple of weeks here. Chargers.
That's fantasy owner move right there. Good job.
That's right. You got to think ahead on some of these things because, you know, when the bye weeks come up, a lot of guys, they look at the bye weeks in the draft, you know, and in a regular draft, not a dynasty draft, you need to do that. But Chargers at Ravens. Lamar Jackson led the team, rushing 62 yards, passing 441, 4 TDs. Mark Andrews, Marquise Brown were targeted 23 times and had 272 of those 441 yards. So why recommend anybody else on this team? Just go there.
Right. They could probably show up with Lamar and the offensive line and do just fine. Flipping over to the Chargers, if I have them, I'm starting my 5-game NFL MVP this year in Justin Herbert. Yeah. And I'd add Eckler in there too. Mike Williams, who's kind of not really the, so far anyway, guy that people recognize as their kind of overall the field leader offensively, at least receiver-wise. He's actually developed into that guy. And even against the Raiders, I think he only had 1 catch for like 4 yards. But I think I mentioned Justin Herbert overthrew him on what would have been a 7 or 8 yard touchdown. And then this last week he went off, and then they completed the one that went for 70-something yards. So I'd start him too. I'd start Keenan Allen, though, with a little asterisk because he's dropped in the last couple of weeks a couple of key what would have been first down throws. And I don't know. I think over the long haul of the season, he's still very talented, one of the best. And so I think if I had him, you know, going against the Ravens, that's a pretty tough defense, but worth a consideration. And I think the game itself, I think you got 2 great offenses, just like the Chargers last week against the Browns, where combined, I think they put up 42 points in the fourth quarter. And then this is going to could be much the same way as that. The Ravens, you can't stop them. They can stop themselves every now and then, but that's a tough out. And I think the Chargers are too.
Vikings and Panthers, you got Alexander Madison is in and RB1 if Cook is out. Justin Jefferson has exploded. Cousins remains solid. Thielen had an off week, but I think he'll probably pick it up again this week.
So about the Panthers, as we mentioned before, after a really surprising 3-0 start, and Carolina's kind of hit the skids these last couple of weeks. The Vikings defense played much better, and I think that Darnold has got to get back to who he was these first few weeks, and at times even with the Jets, sound decision maker, good athletic guy, can extend some plays behind the line of scrimmage. Obviously his league leading rushing touchdowns with 5 kind of came to a close. And I think everybody anticipated that. Right. But, I think what he's got to get back to, get the ball back in the hands of DJ Moore, use Robbie Anderson to get stretch the field, maybe hit a home run or 2, and get this offense back on track, doing what they've been successful doing up until these last couple of weeks.
Cardinals at Browns. Well, I think this is going to be an exciting game. And if Arizona can stop the running game, it's not going to mean a lock on stopping the passing. Brownies just with too many weapons right now. I like Beckham this week, despite an off week.
Okay, let's clear one thing up. There is no such thing as stopping this running game. They're number 1 in the league. They're almost 200 yards a game on the ground. And, they just, like I said before, they combined along with the Chargers to score 42 points in the fourth quarter. And most of that was done on the ground. I'd say, to keep the Cardinals out of the loss column one more week, they're going to have to put up a lot more than the 17 points they just put up against the 49ers. because at that, the 49ers, although great on defense, had Trey Lance starting his first game and did not put up, much offensively. And I think that, with so many offensive weapons the Cardinals do have, it's tough to kind of pick out who's going to be the guy week to week other than Kyler Murray. So if he gets back on track, his best games come when he's active in and outside the pocket, becomes part of the running game, opens things up for whatever receiver he throws, multiple 100 yards to. But like I said, it's tough to predict who that guy's going to be. But Kyler Murray's fairly predictable. That guy's going to come up typically around 300 yards, maybe more a game when you combine rushing and passing.
And the thing, I think the real key to this game is probably more the Browns defense than anything else. They've had some really strong games lately. They've had some, not so strong games, but they're capable of the idea would be to contain, Kyler Murray and not let him get out of the pocket. If they can contain him, I think this is a big win for the Browns and I think big time for their defense as well.
Yeah, this would be a great win for them to get because they are obviously a playoff caliber team and a Super Bowl caliber team, but to be that type of team that people regard as one of the favorites, this is a game they got to win.
Yeah. Raiders and Broncos. I like the Raiders receivers here, but that's it. Now, although the Steelers ran well on the Broncos, so if Josh Jacobs is your guy, I'd stick with him. But, the big question again is we talked about earlier, you're not sure what's going to happen this week after the Gruden firing as far as how the team reacts and what their mindset's going to be.
And to your point, so this is nothing on the stage of what's currently going on with Vegas. But back in 91 with the Lions, I'd say middle part of that year, it was a game against the Rams. Mike Utley, the right guard, went down with at that time, nobody knew what it was, but obviously he's now been paralyzed because of it. And that not only for the team, but I'd say in a bigger sense for the city of Detroit became a rallying point. And who knows? That was a pretty good roster to begin with, but I think the fact that the team, the organization as a whole, and the city as a whole rallied around that kind of propelled us anyway. We lost. I'm not sure what we did after that game he went down, but it was by then, that team was on a roll. And I kind of feel like the Vegas team, the Raiders, I'm not saying it'll happen for them this week, but this could be the type of thing that, as a group, as a team, as a city of Vegas, I think that's a team that could rally. And they've got certainly enough talent to hang in there and keep going. It's just a matter of, like you said, how are they going to react this week, this first couple of weeks?
It's going to be interesting to watch, that's for sure. Especially, I know we talked about it with Brian Selman a few weeks ago, who's a reporter from Vegas, about how that city has now become a major sports city, but it's still not a huge city. It's not like Chicago or New York or even Houston, but it's become this sports mecca, so to speak. And a lot of that has to do with, what Vegas was known for in the beginning. But it's going to be interesting to see how the fans in that city do come together and handle this situation. I think it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and they have. I mean, I've got a cousin that lives there, and ever since the Golden Knights hockey team came, I mean, that city has become something it never was before. And I think the Raiders now are ingrained in there as well.
Cowboys and Patriots, boys have it going on. I'll tell you, Zeke is definitely running like a younger version of himself, and Pollard remains a good handcuff. Lamb still solid. The D looks pretty good. It seems Dallas has moved off Jarwin at tight end and on to Dalton Schultz. He led the team in targets with 8. So again, a switch and a waiver wire pickup this week. I think a lot of folks are going to pick up Schultz this week.
I agree with you on the Cowboys. I mean, they're one of the hottest and best teams, both in reality team football and in fantasy football. The Patriots, I think, are a surprise reality team. Don't have a winning record just yet, but I think Mac Jones, has come in and played solid and effective. not great numbers, but making good decisions and not doing things to hurt them. The losses they've had have been not huge point differentials. Obviously, the Cowboys are a step up in class, I think, from the Patriots. And I don't, fantasy-wise, I don't think there's a Patriot offensive player that comes to mind that I would start. Certainly not against. Hard thing for me to say that the Cowboys are actually good defense now, and that's why I don't think the Patriots stack up offensively against them.
Seahawks at Steelers, that's the Sunday night game. Najee had his first 100 yards rushing game, and the big news is actually the offensive line gelled and played well. Yeah, still, despite playing well, Ben had a few bad moments, so he may be back, but be cautious. Look for James Washington to be a pickup this week on the waiver wires. He's going to pick up some slack with Juju out for the year, shoulder surgery. He's done. So if you need a wideout, James Washington's a good one. And it also means more looks for Claypool, which I really like on top of that. And this week, last week I benched in my league. I benched Ben and went with Mac Jones. And
wow, that's a big decision out of you.
Yeah, but this week, because Seattle has been, so decimated, I'm going back to Ben this week and benching Jones because of who Jones is playing, and they're playing the Cowboys. So it's right now it's a week to week. It's not, it's like, okay, look at where we're at and see where we're going. So
again, another savvy move by you, Yoda. I like it. I was going to say, as good as the turnaround was for your Steelers last week, just the opposite is true, unfortunately, in Seattle, because not only did they lose to the Rams, but they lost a quarterback, Russell Wilson, in the process. And now Russ is going to be cooking over on the sidelines for a while. And unfortunately, Geno Smith over the last few years has not had much playing time. Good player, but I don't know that he's going to step in and provide that offense what Russell Wilson does. I think DK Metcalf and Lockett will still be the main targets. I just don't think the guy delivering the ball is going to have as much effectiveness as what Russell Wilson would.
And that's a big question mark, because those guys, they were really starting to click. I mean, Metcalf especially. And now, he's going to be the guy. He's going to be double teamed anyway, but now
you'd almost have to allow for a little period of team depression to set in first.
Yeah.
And then see what they do to get over that.
Yeah. Monday night, Bills at Titans. Hard to keep Derrick Henry down. Marcus Johnson will see waiver wire action this week. He was targeted 5 times, and that's not a lot, but it's just one shy of A.J. Brown, who led the team in targets. I think Tannehill still, for me, remains a placeholder. I'm not looking much there.
Well, the Bills are, to me, this season's best traveling show, road show or home show. Mm-hmm. And after dropping that first game to the Steelers at home, they've gone on the road, been perfect home and away. Both road games both against Miami and KC were won by a combined score of 73-20. And that's almost closer than it really was, because one of those was a 35-0 shutout against Miami. And along with probably the best and most consistent quarterback in the league with Josh Allen, I'd start Diggs, Emmanuel Sanders for sure, who's got 4 touchdowns at this point, and now tight end Dawson Knox, who's got 5 touchdowns. Even though Devin Singletary is Buffalo's leading running back, I still think Josh Allen is their best runner, because behind the line of scrimmage, he creates a lot of space for people around the field, like he did last game with Dawson Knox. But he's also a pretty effective runner when he gets the ball in his hands, moving across the line of scrimmage, having had to go along with his 12 touchdown passes, a couple of rushing touchdowns as well.
And there you have it. Kramer and Brill, Fantasy Football Podcast, and now a video cast. You can hear the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, Odyssey, and wherever you get your podcasts. And now you can also see the video cast on YouTube by going to my Bob Brill YouTube channel, or by finding the links for all of this at kramerandbrill.com. That's the easiest way, kramerandbrill.com. And for my friend and colleague Erik Kramer, I'm Bob Brill. We'll see you next time.